Hey guys, my name is Brad Riley with Aerocharger Turbos, and today we've got Calvin Felker with us. Some of you will be familiar with him from our other platforms. He's our head racer for our Skidoo team. He's raced anything from snowmobiles to four-wheelers to motorcycles. Is there anything you haven't raced?
Oh, I'm sure there's something. I can't think of anything, but yeah, I'm sure there's
If we
something.
figure out what that is, we'll figure out a way to get him racing it. He seems to have a talent for that. But tell us a little bit about what we're going to work with today.
What we got here is the Polaris RZR. It's a 2013 model. It's the Jagged X edition. It's got a few extra features. It's a four-seater. It's a pretty cool unit.
Yeah, you know, and like you said, it's not technically a four-seater, but it's on the four-seater platform. And I've owned a lot of RZRs over the years, and the four-seaters are my favorite. I do have two kids. They love to get in the back with the little helmets on and whatnot, and it's a lot of fun. But for me, the four-seater is a more stable platform. It's a longer wheelbase. It does weigh more, but with the Aerocharger Turbo system, we get that power-to-weight ratio back in line, and we've got sufficient power and a nice, clean platform. We've been building RZR kits since 2008 when the platform was first released. It's been a huge success for us, and a few things that set us apart from the others in the industry. We build our own turbo. Turbochargers are our life. It's what we do day in and day out. For the most part, we're all turbo machinery engineers here. We've got some mechanical engineers. But with that knowledge of turbocharging, we're able to really create the best performing kit in the industry for whatever RZR it is. We were the first to introduce the air-to-water system. We've really brought a lot of innovation to the industry, and it's a lot of fun. Today we'll talk about the individual components going onto this kit, and while we're at it, we'll talk about some of the stuff in the past that's been a lot of fun to work with. So join us.
The first step in installing your Aerocharger Turbo kit is going to be removing the rear end plastics, the side panels, the bed. On the Jagged X, we got the roll cage that comes around the back, so that's going to be the first step for us on this model, is to remove the roll cage, and then we'll start the side panels and the bed. It's a big help if you get every single screw out of the panel.
Hold that. A couple of things here on taking the bed off. It's all fairly self-explanatory. You know, the rear bumper part of it comes off. You can be sure to be careful about the electronics. Here we've got the stock intake silencer. We'll have a couple of screws here, but be careful. We've got the crankcase vent right here. Let's pay attention to that. I'll disconnect here. We'll pull the unit off. As long as we've got you to this point, the plastics are off, the bumpers are off. Let's just point out a little bit about the real estate that we're going to be working in. Right here, this is coming from the intake silencer. This will be the factory air filter airbox system. This is the intake for the clutch. Clutches tend to get hot, so they're going to pump a lot of fresh air through them to try to keep them cool. This is the intake. This is then the exhaust that comes up and actually blows down behind the engine. Right here is a part called an IAC control. It's the idle air control, basically. We're going to tap into that later for our controls. But on the back of the Jagged X, we have actually a unique muffler built by SLP. SLP is Starting Line Products. This is a great muffler. If you are working with the Jagged X, we do have to take it off for our system. We'll be using the real estate for it, plus a muffler intended for a naturally aspirated vehicle. Does not work very well with a turbo. The good news is it's a great muffler. If you're pulling it off your Jagged X, it's an eBay item that sells very, very quick because they're in short supply and they're in very high demand. So from here, we'll take the stock airbox off and that SLP muffler off and proceed from there. Yep, that worked. I've taken the two bolts off the top of the factory airbox. On the throttle bodies, there's two hose clamps from the bottom. Loosen those up, and the whole thing pulls off. You've got your IAC feed coming out of your airbox. Go ahead and pull that out. Now we're going to work in the back of the cab area. We need to get access to the header, and we'll remove the header assembly. First we have to remove the plastic panel, the factory heat shield, and then we'll pull the headers up. All right, now.
So now that we have the heat shield removed, I'm going to remove the header pipe. You'll need a 6mm ball end Allen wrench. It's nice if you have a gun or a 3/8 impact on there or something. It makes it a little quicker. Very carefully pull that through. So in your kit, there'll be the instruction manual. In that manual, there'll be a page that's just free in the manual. It'll have this little template in there that you'll need to cut out with some scissors. It's for the passenger side. It goes in the bottom 2 holes. You'll cut above the second hole from the bottom and leave that top hole. On the driver's side, you'll cut the whole bracket off, all 3 holes. I'm gonna use this saw to cut those off. I mean, you can use whatever you got. I got this sweet little saw, but whatever you got that can cut that thin metal. Make sure you cover your stuff up, especially the throttle body, so you don't get no debris in there, no sparks or anything like that. So now that we have the tabs cut off in the back, we're gonna install the bigger injectors. Aerocharger installs it in the kit. It all comes labeled, XP fuel injectors, 2 injectors, comes with some grease in there so you can grease up the O-rings when you install them. You'll need a 5mm Allen wrench. Take these 2 out. The fuel rail will come out with the injectors as we're about to show you. And those 2 little clips, and it's pretty easy swap. Disconnect the fuel rail, cut the zip tie. Makes it a little easier to get them out there so you can work on them. Just pop the outsides of the tabs, flex them out a little bit. They'll slide right down. Unplug the injector. And she'll slide right out of there. So now that I have the fuel rail removed, I've taken out the stock injectors. Our bigger injectors look a little different. One of the main differences you'll notice is the plug-in's different. It's because our fuel controller will plug directly into our injectors, and there'll be a little wire hanging out that will plug into your stock wiring harness. It does matter which side, mag and PTO, and I'll show that a little more in detail when I'm installing them. They are labeled. It's pretty easy, but it's a good thing to keep track of. I'll put some grease on the O-rings just so they don't get torn and they last a little longer, and it's just a light film on both O-rings on each injector. So now that I got the grease on there, I'm going to install the clip. It'll go in this slot here, just like so. With the clip on there, it makes it easy to install. Should just push right up on there like so. Give her a little tug, make sure she's where she needs to be and secure. Do the same with the other side. Like that. You can use a screwdriver or some to remove this wiring harness. This one was barely on there. And then you'll remove these 2 10mm bolts and remove this bracket here for the stock air box.
Well, Calvin, now that we're at the point to put the airbox on, few unique features about this airbox is it has an integrated air-to-water system on it. If you can see from this side, this is the intake that would actually feed the 2 throttle bodies. Across here is a core for the water to flow in. Flows in from the top to the bottom. On this side is the intake to feed through the radiator. We also have a blow-off valve here. It's a nice integrated system. It turned into a nice clean package on this, and the installation goes very simple. Let's show us.
So now that Brad's went through the basic features of it, you know, you got to loosen these clamps, says that in the instructions. Loosen the clamps, slide them back up there. Make sure you took your plugs or your rags out of your throttle bodies. And slide it on like so. Now that we got the box pushed on there, you want to push the hose clamps down. Make sure you get them nice and snug.
Now that we've got the airbox installed, let's talk about the air filter for a second. We don't just select one that just happens to fit in there. What we do is we'll look at our CFM requirements. On this engine, we said, okay, let's go ahead and take 1,000 cc's in case people punch it out, which historically they do. Let's run it at 15 pounds of boost, which typically somebody's going to run up there. Not that we recommend that, but and also let's assume that people will be in a long parade line for a whole weekend and not change the element. So what we've got here is a Donaldson filter, and the flow requirements meet what we just talked about. It's a really nice filter. The first element is they have a centrifugal inlet on it that allows the big chunks to fall out. But the filters are basically available at many places around anybody's home state. And as you can see, the filter element on it is huge. But we want you to be able to go all weekend, the dirtiest environments, and not restrict the turbo's intake. That's key to turbo performance, as turbochargers do not like to have their intake restricted. We've sized this properly, and they work pretty well.
So your mounting hardware for the Donaldson should be in a little bag like this, should be labeled, and all it is the hose clamp and the bracket. So I got the Donaldson filter here. I got the mounting bracket kind of on there, just not super tight, so I can move it around, kind of custom fit it. We're just going to kind of put it on there loose for now. Make sure you get this pointed to the top, this in the bottom. You're going to come up on the downside here. We're going to use this tab right there. Using this Torx bolt that holds down the bed. Just kind of snug, not too tight. Yeah, let her hang. Next step, we're going to install the turbo inlet on the driver's side intake. You're going to have to remove this little panel there, take the foam out, get yourself a X-Acto knife and a silver Sharpie. You're just going to lay it over, trace around it, so you have an idea of where it's going to lay. You're going to want to cut inside of that 1/8 of an inch or more. You want it snug, but you want a lip there to hold it from coming through. Just like so. Grab your piece of foam. Stuff her back in there. Voila. Now we'll install the header. Goes in the same exact way that you took out the stock header. You'll use the same header bolts that were on the stock unit. So as you can see, I've taken the turbo out of the turbo box. The oil will come in a little bag with these two gaskets. This one you don't need. The heat shield works as a gasket. And this is for the exhaust side. You want to put your full container oil into here. There's two different plugs. There's the vent plug, and then there's the plug. This one's already red Loctited, this one's not. You'll take this one out, use the entire bottle of oil, and when you put this plug back in, you'll want to red Loctite it. The turbo will come set at 5 PSI and at 2 turns. Comes with an extra spring if you want to turn it up, and shims as well. Now that we've got oil in the turbo, you're going to set it on the table with the exhaust flange flat on the table, and the exhaust at this angle, and just loosely bolt it up for now until we get it up inside the chassis. So now that we have the turbo and the exhaust assembly just loosely bolted together, I'm going to take the kit and raise it into the back end. So now I got the turbo and the turbo exhaust mounted up loosely. The mounting hardware comes in the kit. The longer bolt goes up here with the big aluminum washer that's machined to fit into the stock frame. The shorter bolt will go down here with the 2 rubber washers on each side of the exhaust bracket. You will loosely but snugly mount up the silicone hoses to the turbo. And from there, you should be pretty good and ready to move on to the next step, which will be mounting the connector between the header pipe and the turbo. The easiest way I've found is to come in from the bottom here. You'll have to flex the turbo assembly, which is why we leave it a little loose. Slide it up there. Install your bolts. The next step's going to be putting on the exhaust springs, and then we're just going to tighten up the silicone hose clamps and then all the bolts as well, your turbo bolts and the mounting bolts. Now I'll remove the hood. Next, you'll remove these 5 bolts. After you've removed the 5 screw bolts, come in here, just use a flat blade screwdriver, plastic push rivets. Remove this. So now that we got the stock plastics off, I'm going to install our intercooler. I've unwrapped it. When you put it in there, there's a couple tabs on the frame, and you kind of got to slide it in there at this angle, and it'll go down. There's 2 holes already in the plastic fascia here. They work perfect to go through with our bolts that are included in the kit. The speed nuts are already ground down to make a custom fit, so they fit nice. The one on my kit needed a little bit more. If your bolt's not going in smoothly, maybe check that. I had to sand the side just a little bit more. Once you get the intercooler in there, you kind of got to jiggle it around a little bit. Flashlight helps to make sure you kind of got the holes lined up. Once you get them lined up, install the bolts. Now that we have the bottom of the radiator bolted in, we'll zip tie the top. There's 2 aluminum tabs that will lay flush against the steel frame. And I like to put a couple, 2, 3 zip ties on each side to secure the top of the radiator. So your first hole, follow the instructions. This video is good to show you. We're going to drill approximately in here. Then for the second one, we'll mark it. Make sure we get the correct distance. And there shouldn't be anything behind here, but it's always safe to double check. Make sure you're not drilling into a coolant bottle or anything like that. Now I'm going to install the water pump. I'm going to make sure the outlet of the pump is pointing towards the front of the vehicle. Next, I'll be installing the fill neck. This part goes to the top. Now that we have the filler neck installed, I'm going to take the long end of the hose that comes from the intercooler, and I'm going to route it. Mainly making sure it's clean, just like everything else, just so it's not going to rub or hit. I'm going to tuck it in like this, and I'll reach in from the top, grab it. Put my hose clamp on it. Now I'm hooking the hose up to the front of the water pump. So next we're going to route our coolant lines. We're going to take this off, bunch of Torx screws and bolts, and then we'll take the handle off. So now that we have all the screws and bolts out of the plastic, it's loose, it won't come off because of the plastic handle. Take a big flat blade screwdriver, pop the top off, and there's one more Torx screw down in there, and it'll slide off. So now that we have the center plastic and the top of the shifter removed, we're ready to route our coolant line. You'll notice in your kit, you just have one long coolant hose. I cut it in half. We're going to start at the back, go to the front. Don't worry, you'll have excess, so you'll have extra to cut off. Once we get it routed, you'll cut it to length. All right, so I already have the first hose routed. I'm going to start with the second hose. Again, just like anything you're routing, just make sure it's not going to be pinched or get chafed anywhere. Try to do the best job. Take your time when routing hoses and wires. You're going to want to be real careful not to get the hose somewhere close to the drive shaft here. I mean, if you had the hose laying on there, it's going to be spinning. It'll cut right into it for sure. So now that we have the hoses routed, zip tied, and secure, we're positive they're not going to rub on any of the drive shafts or steering rods. We're ready to cut it to length. One thing that's kind of crucial is making sure your hoses go to the right place. I marked one hose with a silver Sharpie on each end. Just make sure the one hose goes from the top of the intercooler to the radiator, and the bottom of the intercooler goes to the water pump. It's very critical to make sure you get the right length, to where it's not too long, but it's not too short to where it's kinking. So now that we got the coolant lines cut to length and attached in the rear, we're going to do the same in the front. My one hose that was going to the radiator was already too length, so I attached it. This one is a little long, so I'm going to cut her off. I've already marked it. This is the X hose, so it will be going to the bottom of the water pump, straight from the bottom of the intercooler.